Well, welcome everybody to today's webinar. I know we may have a few stragglers that will join us in a few moments or so, but in the interest of time, because we do have a lot of content to get through today, and because there are some of you that have been able to join on time, I'd like to kick us off. So, as I said, welcome to today's Page Up Gamification webinar. Today I'm proud that we're joined by Sylvia Warhauser-Smith and Aaron Hardy from Page Up People. Both Sylvia and Aaron have been doing some extensive research into gamification over the last few months and such. And so they've got a whole lot of information to share with you today based on that research. For those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars before, I'm Penny Street, I'm our Product Marketing Manager, and I'll just be facilitating on the side today because Sylvia and Aaron will really be driving today's webinar. Before we do get started, a few little housekeeping items. First of all, you are in listen-only mode, but that does not mean you cannot participate. You'll notice over in the panel for GoToWebinar that there's a little spot there called questions. You can actually type in your questions there at any time, and throughout the webinar, as appropriate, if we can, we'll fit those in. However, we will be having a Q&A time at the very end that will capture any of those that have come throughout the webinar that we haven't been able to get to during the webinar itself. We also will be recording today's session. So what will happen is approximately 48 hours, business hours after today's webinar, you will actually receive an email from ourselves, and that will have a link to the recording. We're also going to give you a special gift today, and that is a copy of our actual gamification white paper. So either a copy of that or instructions on how to receive that copy will form part of that email as well. That'll come out to you in, as I said, approximately 48 business hours. Well, I think that's all of the actual component. We will finish that on time as well. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Sylvia and Aaron to actually take us through gamification. And Sylvia, this is a big, big subject. And in the talent management space, you'd actually think there wouldn't be a big connection here, but I'm sure you're going to tell us differently.
Thanks very much, Penny. And hi, Aaron. How are you today?
Great, thanks, Sylvia. Lovely to have you over here in Singapore, popping in to visit, and a great opportunity to talk about gamification.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because we actually held a breakfast on gamification only a couple of months ago here in Singapore, as well as elsewhere in the world. And the resounding interest that we've had in it has been really quite staggering. We've had one of the highest levels of registrations to this webinar, for example, literally hundreds of people on the line right now. And so to the question of is the topic of gamification hot or not, well, it's certainly up there on the radar of people, and whether we're trying to work out what to do with it, how to use it in enterprises, how to use it in talent management, or just whether to actually work out whether it's the latest fad, is a big question right now, some of which we hope to give some clarification to people on today. And that, of course, has resulted in a whole lot of research that we've done that has culminated in the white paper that was flagged by Penny. And we're going to present some of that research today, and obviously people can follow that up by looking at the documentation that follows. So we should get into it, hey? So what we did in terms of identifying the appropriateness of gamification in the talent management space was to do an assessment of it. And we basically assessed it on two levels, like the 9-box performance and potential assessment that we sometimes do of our employees. So we looked at performance of gamification in business enterprises. And in that regard, we really looked at, well, does gamification actually improve business results? Which, of course, is a hot question if you're a business manager or an IT manager or a talent manager looking to invest in this type of technology. And then the lead-on question from that is, well, if it does improve results, what sorts of results exactly does it improve? And what do organisations aim to achieve by introducing gamification into their talent management platforms. So those were the performance questions that we posed in looking at the research for this white paper.
Great. It's a lovely approach, doing a 9-box on a process that you might look at enhancing within an organisation, and seeing what sort of potential, what research is out there to support it, and what other organisations have done in terms of performance. From a potential perspective, it's really important to look at where to concentrate on for HR. Yeah, whether that's in selection, whether that's in onboarding, whether it's in learning, what applications are best to gamify. And that leads on to how can engagement be optimized? Because what we've found is that a lot of the use cases for gamification, and Sylvia will go into this further, are very much about getting better engagement out of our employees. And then thinking to the future, given that many organizations are just dipping their toes in the water, what's the future for gamification and game mechanics within talent management?
Yeah, so Aaron, I'd like to pick up immediately on the issue of engagement, because we see that, and the world sees that as probably the 21st century problem in organisations. Why are people not more engaged in their workplaces? Now, Gallup are obviously famous for doing their global engagement surveys, and they continue to come up with some pretty appalling results, to be quite frank. In their latest survey, we see that only 13% of employees are actually engaged. 63% of employees in organisations are not engaged, and 24% are actually actively disengaged, which are really appalling statistics, I guess, if you're a talent manager or a leader in an organisation, when you're thinking about the investments that HR are making in creating engaging workplaces. I guess one way you could think about this, Aaron, is that if you had 8 of your colleagues in a room right now, by these statistics, only one of those people actually wants to be there. 5 of them are open to alternative employment suggestions. 2 of them already have other job interviews on the go, or worse still, are totally disengaged and aren't looking to leave. So this is a really big problem. In any team of people, engagement is going to be a considerable issue. And despite the fact that HR have been working on this problem for many years now, introducing lots of different initiatives, there still hasn't been a magic bullet for solving the challenge of employee engagement. There still aren't sustainable ways of ensuring employee engagement. And this is the big challenge that we're looking to face.
Yeah, Sylvia, what's been really interesting about our research, that organisations are really stretching as far as they can to find solutions for this engagement problem. And gamification really taps into our natural inclination for the way that we want to learn, the way that we want to connect with people, and it's a key driver that we're seeing coming up in many consumer applications, and really now starting in that HR talent management space.
Yeah, and not only is gaming and playing games natural, as human beings, we're actually born to play. In fact, it's fundamentally how we learn. And through our childhood, we're exposed to all sorts of different games, and that is an actual method of learning, and that's the way that we actually evolve and learn the most. So whether it's ball games or board games or card games or conquests, we love to engage in games, and we do that from a very early age, and we do it very naturally. And it's more than just having fun. So, of course, we see kids in the playground and it looks like they're just having fun, but even as they're doing that, they're testing theories and assumptions, they're building social networks, they're collaborating with the other players, their imaginations are getting sparked out there on the field. Games have got a really significant role to play in how we learn and how we develop into adulthood.
It's quite interesting, Sylvia. We, as adults, it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure playing games. We've seen many examples of these runaway successes with the likes of a little bit sillier games like Angry Birds and Candy Crush. but some more serious games in there. The Room, for example, which is it's more of a problem-solving puzzler that really gets you thinking and is testing out some of those neural pathways that really need to be exercised. And that's meaning that games are spanning not just that younger generation, where it seems natural, but also across the generations. People are really reaching out to find more tools that are engaging for them. When we had our breakfast recently here, we asked the question at the very beginning, who loves games? And there was no one in the room that didn't put their hand up. Everyone in some way loved games, whether it was card games, with board games, a more traditional approach, or all of the digital games that are available to us. And that's something that is very easy to see if you look at how technology is creating an unprecedented explosion of games. The social networking infrastructure through tools like Facebook and the iOS ecosystem and Android ecosystem that puts all sorts of applications in our pockets are really opening up the possibilities for people to play casually while they're waiting for a bus, while they're doing all sorts of things. And if anyone's been to the App Store lately on any of these devices, the top 3 paid and top grossing apps are dominated by games. In fact, 75% of the top 100 apps are games. Sylvia, do you have a favourite game that you're playing at the moment?
Well, I'll have to put my hand up, guilty as charged, with Words with Friends, I must say. I'm a bit of an addict to that and always looking for another friend to have a challenge with. And I think I'll talk a little bit more about what it is that makes games work. But this has become a huge industry as a result of technology coming into the field. So some traditional games like Scrabble have been digitised into Words with Friends, but the whole industry has been able to evolve an entire new set of games that nobody's ever seen or heard of before. And of course, as professionals now, we're looking at how we can tap into that to increase learning and engagement and productivity in the workforce. So you see on the screen now, this is an explosive industry. It's gone from an $80 million industry in 2011 to a $242 million industry, and it's just exploding year on year to a $5 billion industry forecast by 2018. And the other thing that's really interesting about the evolution of the gaming industry is the stereotypical gamer. So Aaron, I think if someone were to say, well, what does a typical, sort of gamer look like? We'd all be thinking about, some sort of underactive, overweight, geeky, ticko teenage male. But that's not actually the profile of gamers at all, not the stereotypical one. As it happens, the average age of game players is about 37, and 25% of players are actually aged over 50. And 42% of those are women. So we're really looking at this, as you said earlier, really crossing all different types of, all the different generations, all different types of cultures. And it's really in an infused and natural way of us approaching, what we do day to day. So I guess the big question is, why is it such a successful and growing industry? And what is it that is driving the growth of this type of business? And so I guess we're going to look at this at a couple of different levels. And the first one that I'd like to introduce is how games actually work on the brain. So there's a very natural inclination for us to play games, and it's tied down to human motivation. So when we think about corporate processes and using them to improve productivity, making people get motivated to engage in those types of activities is a function of actually stimulating them at a motivational level. And when we're talking about human motivation, there's really 2 types that we're looking to stimulate. One of those, as you see on the left-hand side there, is an intrinsic type of motivation. Now, this is a deep, personally driven type of motivation that's very close to our self-identity. And it means that we look to have fun and have control and power over what it is that we're doing, autonomy in playing the game, that we're able to connect and collaborate with others, compete with others, perhaps achieve levels of mastery that help us to actually improve a skill, but also have some meaning in what we do. So the intrinsic qualities that we can build into gaming make them very powerful and very addictive. Then there's also the extrinsic rewards that we get. And when we're talking about gaming, this is typically what people see when they're playing games such as the ones you've already highlighted, Aaron. So getting rewards, getting points, badges, finding yourself up there at the top of a leaderboard, progressing through different levels as you're learning in a game. These are all extrinsic type of factors that motivate people to stay engaged in games.
I see you've got punishment up there, Sylvia. That seems like an odd one to get people motivated.
Yeah, so it's the anti-motivator, if you like. And, you know, some of the games are quite open in terms of telling you that you've failed to proceed to the next level, or that you failed to beat your competitor. And so we're also motivated by improving and overcoming those negative types of motivations. So all of this combines in a sort of complex cocktail of what goes on in our heads when we're engaging in any different type of activity. Now, what sits behind all motivation is some of the chemicals that are actually in our heads that are driving our responses to what's happening in our environment. And when we're talking about gaming, we typically talk about the neurotransmitter dopamine, because dopamine is that happy drug, the one that makes you feel like you've actually received a reward, and it makes you feel good about what just happened. Now, there's many ways that you can spark a bit of a dopamine hit. You can get it just by getting a smile from somebody, getting some praise, getting some good feedback, or winning in a game, for example. So when we receive badges and prizes and accumulate points and climb through different levels in a game, all of these things spark a little dopamine hit. And of course, the interesting thing with dopamine is that it's very addictive. And so the more that we get that little reward, the more that we chase the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's why games that progresses through levels become so addictive and become so engaging. This is a key aspect of building games that are effective.
Yeah. And when you beat that game, there's that really interesting effect. And it's something that actually, it's across cultures, where you throw your hands up in the air. And that's that feeling of exhilaration where you've beat the game, you've been successful, and the dopamine rush there must be just phenomenal for you to be able to give you that feeling.
Exactly right. And it goes beyond actually just feeling good. So the feel good is the thing that makes us keep coming back for more. But what dopamine also does is it's a primary chemical in the reinforcement of learning. So when we get these dopamine spikes, we actually embed information much deeper into our brain. And that's really important when you're thinking of using gamification in applications such as learning and development. So people actually do learn better when they feel good about the experience that they're having, which, when you think about it, is a pretty natural thing and not all that surprising. So that's one aspect of it, that you've got this chemical thing going on in your head related to feeling good about it. But the other thing that games do is that they introduce a little risk. So there's always a challenge going on, as you've identified. And it turns out that in terms of brain effectiveness, that we actually respond very well to a little bit of risk in our lives. Most people actually respond better to games that have an element of chance in them, as well as being skill-based, than just being skill-based alone. And it's actually at that level of 50% chance that you get the greatest spike in dopamine release. So despite the fact that we sometimes think in an enterprise environment that the game needs to be very structured around a learning outcome, actually throwing in some things that are quite novel and chancy makes it much more interesting and engaging to people to come back and play it some more.
And memorable as well. I know that some of the games that we've played that have been enterprise focused have very much stuck in my mind because they've got that novelty to them. I've got something that I can link back to and say, you know what, that was actually quite cool, and I'm really glad that I was able to learn that particular way.
Yeah, and the mere fact that you remember these things shows that it has been imprinted deeper into your brain. So, most people will go to a training course and, forget 70 or 80% of the content that they've heard, even within hours having received it. If you're actually interacting with that material in the context of a game, you're having a totally different experience to learning it in a classroom. The other thing that you can do with gamification of applications is that you can make them really interactive. So our visual field is by far our strongest field. So the fact that games often involve characters, animations, movement, and are highly visually stimulating means that a huge amount of our brain real estate is actually engaged in viewing them and working through them and playing them. Most games you also find have great auditory content. We talked about Words with Friends just before, and I noted that in the latest upgrade to the Words with Friends app, there's been some great changes in both the movement of the characters that you have to work with in that Scrabble game, as well as the sounds that are associated with that. And it gives you a buzz. It's just fun to play with. Most games are also tactile to some degree, so you're interacting with them either on a keyboard or with a mouse or on a touch screen. So you're getting this combination of visual, auditory and tactile stimulation, which means there's lots of brain areas firing. And the more stimulation there is in the brain, the more engagement there is, the more learning there is, the more connections that are made. I guess one of the things that's obviously easy with games is that it's a bit of a safety zone. You can go there, you can blow up your opponent, you can do all sorts of dastardly deeds, you can even die in a game, and all you need to do is reboot or start again or move on to the next level, and you get to do it all over again. So games do create a safe environment where you can test some things and some skills and not die in the process, which is a good outcome.
And it's quite fascinating looking at some of the commercially available, massively multiplayer games where millions upon millions of hours are being devoted each week because people are getting more enjoyment out of playing those games, and it is a safe environment. If they lose, they restart or they create their character again. It's not like real life where there can be some very severe consequences for the way that you act and the way that you need to interact with different environments. Games allow you to step outside of that, and from a learning perspective, it's very interesting to be able to provide those environments for people to learn safely.
Yeah, and I guess the image that we've got here is quite, sort of a consumer type game, a fun type game. But gamification is being used in the medical industry, for example, to help doctors and nurses actually develop their skills in identifying and diagnosing patient issues and dealing with those. To the extent that if they fail to do it correctly, the patient actually deteriorates to the point of death. And that's obviously a simulated environment which is much safer than testing that in the real world. So we're not just talking about game mechanics used to play and to have fun. We're talking about people really starting to think about, how can we use this to embed real learning, accelerate the development of people, and do it in a way that really makes them enjoy the experience. And doing that, obviously, socially is really important as well. So a lot of games allow and, in fact, require you to collaborate with others. And that, again, is a fundamental human driver. And it recruits, again, an enormous amount of neural activity when we're engaged with others. It brings out our competitive streak. It brings out our collaborative streak. And we enjoy the jostle of playing with other people. So that's another key factor in making games effective. And if you look at it in terms of the impact on the brain in terms of challenge, we get a lot of status. We get a lot of that feel-good dopamine is actually about the fact that it increases our status when we win something. So we feel like we've either mastered a game or we've won a contest, and that makes us feel good about that effect. And those leaderboards and badges and trophies and things make us give evidence to that elevation in our status. The factor of novelty, which we also mentioned a little bit earlier already, is really important because it's really hard to retain dry, drawn-out content. Our brains are naturally novelty-seeking, they're curious, and we're quite monkey-minded. So, it's actually hard to focus and concentrate attention. So having something that has the effect of doing that gets us in, immerses us in a way that makes us really get in there and commit ourselves to it, is generating a level of interest through that novelty that is otherwise pretty hard to get, say, from dry training content. That's why you see a lot of games animated and putting forward challenges and all of these things through some of the the boredom of the information masses that we get these days. I guess on that safety issue also, what games do is provide a level of certainty. So even though you're going into a game that could be a little bit chancy, the game has rules. So, one of the things very clear about games is to win them, you must follow the rules and you must overcome, I guess, some of the challenges that those rules put forward.
Humans love rules. I know that there's a job description is something that a lot of people in organisations, it's a really important piece for them, and setting those objectives, being able to meet them, and knowing what the expectations are within their roles is almost fundamental to get the right productivity and efficiency.
Yeah, so it's there's so many aspects that we can start thinking about using games for that are going to improve employee performance, talent management processes, and I guess that's where we're heading with this. What can we learn from how consumer games have taken off to adapt into the enterprise world to really make us more effective as talent managers and leaders? So a couple of other things that are quite unique, and then I think we'll take a little time out and do a bit of a poll with our audience, is equity is one of the things that is promoted by the playing of games. So games tend to, because they work on rules, are quite fair and unbiased. So you don't get people pitching themselves against each other unless they have equitable benchmarks. You need to know what the rules of the game are and how to win it, and if you win, you want to see that you've won it. And games do that. There are no favourites and there are no biases in playing games.
There's an interesting thing there where people also want to opt into games. It's really important that they're choosing to play and they're choosing to be in that safe environment.
Yeah, so that aspect of volunteering and putting discretionary effort in, actually choosing autonomously to engage with this game, is a really key factor of the game. If I want to play it, I'm not being told that I must complete an exercise, and that's a fundamental shift in the approach to getting people involved in doing work activities. And so, I guess all of what we've just been saying leads to this one very important point, which when you engage people and you connect them with the content and the material, and you do that in a way that is playful and fun and also creates learning content, it sticks. So this is the way to get people to not just connect and get themselves involved in the game, but to actually get the outcomes, the productive outcomes of real learning, real development.
And I know, I think there was some research from Aberdeen that looked at gamification in onboarding. So they were able to see that there was a certain percentage point increase by putting in onboarding programs. But then on top of getting that increased engagement, there was almost a 20 percentage point increase when they introduced games into these onboarding processes. So that learning stick and engagement is even more reinforced when you are coupling with your traditional processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the PageUp clients that are on this call may know, or should certainly be talking to their account managers about, what opportunities there are for bringing, some of these aspects into some things like the onboarding process and the learning process, because that's certainly the way that we're moving our technology forward. And it might be a good point now to actually ask the question, given that we've talked about the fact that gamification lends itself to all sorts of applications, be they in the recruitment and selection process, in the learning and development process, performance, talent programs, succession planning. Where do people see themselves using it? So I wondered, Penny, whether we can get that poll going to see whether people are thinking about using gamification as a tool in their talent management processes.
Definitely, and that poll's going, and we have got, it's a race actually happening there, so it is a multi-choice, everybody, so it looks like most people have actually worked it out, that they can select more than one of the options there. And just while that's happening though, we have had a couple of questions come through, so Sylvia, would you mind answering one of those or two of those for us while people get to put in their selection? And it comes from earlier on in the actual discussion you had earlier, which is around what is the difference between not engaged and actively disengaged? Could you give us just a little bit more clarity around that, please?
Yeah, that's a really interesting statistic, that not engaged and actively disengaged, and it just goes to show how deep the problem is. So when an employee is not engaged, they've basically tuned out. They're sort of at a neutral level where they don't really care. They're not connected in the way that you would expect someone that's quite motivated and engaged in their job is. But when they're actively disengaged, that neutral territory actually becomes quite negative. And so an actively disengaged person starts to become almost a threat to an organisation, because they're not only are they not connected to their work, but they could even be a damaging force in the organisation by the way that they're communicating with others, the type of sense that people are getting from that individual in as part of their team, or just not performing to some of the tasks and activities that they're supposed to be doing. So there can be quite some active or passive negative factors come in there, but actively disengaged people are really quite harmful to an organisation's health.
And they can really drag a team down. I mean, it's so important in a high-performance culture and high-performance teams that everyone needs to be able to trust the rest of the people in their team and be on that same mission. When you've got someone that's actively disengaged and the words that they use are acidic or damaging in terms of the way that they're communicating to clients, that's a really big problem for organisations.
Yeah, so hopefully you haven't got too many of those in your organisation, and they do, they tend to be less in number, but that big population of disengaged people that basically just don't care whether they're there or not is probably the bulk of the problem, because that really has an impact on organisational performance, on your ability to actually achieve corporate goals, but also to innovate and to create a workplace that people are attracted to being part of. So engagement is a huge and ongoing issue.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so very much for that, Sylvia and Aaron. A great response there. I'm just going to share those results now with everyone. So it looks like, I think as we would suspect, that learning and development is our top runner there, with recruitment coming in as the second, performance then third, and then succession planning and top talent programs coming in fourth. So we do have a few people that are not quite sure, saying no, it's not something for us, but just a small percentage of our actual audience. So I'm going to close that back off and go back to our slides now for everybody, but thank you all for your participation. And have you got any comments on those type of results? Did they surprise you, Sylvia and Aaron?
Yeah, actually, if you could just leave them up for a moment, Penny, I think they're quite fascinating, and I guess on the whole, we're pretty much saying that, well, A, it does seem to be a hot topic and clearly is not a fad. But in the recruitment and learning and development space, we certainly see a lot of attention and focus on gamified applications joining that. But I think it's quite interesting in the performance space, don't you think, Aaron? Because performance is one of those areas that, of course, is suffering enormously from disengaged, as a disengaged application. You know, people are not happy engaging with their performance processes. Managers are disengaged in implementing them, and thinking about how we can make performance more engaging and building some game content into there could be quite transformative.
And we've seen a lot of success with niche products that target areas like call centers. So focusing on that gamification within the call center has been particularly successful because it's very structured work. It's quite easy to tap into things like call volumes and success rates and the like, and then be able to turn that into levels and awards and achievements that people can achieve over time. How that's applied out into a broader performance context in professional environments will be very interesting to see how that pans out, and something that we're very interested in talking to organisations about. Learning and development, as you say, not a surprise. I think there's been plenty of bespoke work done in the learning and development space for many years, and what we're hoping to see in the next couple of years is that learning and development starts to become less bespoke, and that it's easier to build these gamified components to really embed that learning. And I guess just on the recruitment front, we're seeing, particularly from a grad perspective, that graduate programs will often have a gamified element up front in that selection process to really help people work out where it is that they're going to go. And I think an interesting segue into what we're about to talk to next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just also add that obviously, you know, if you've got a talent management system that's unified across all of these different applications, being actually able to use some of these gamified elements, not just in one aspect like recruitment, but starting to build those in across all other aspects of your talent management system, is clearly something that is evolving, and certainly that we're building into our technology. So I think it's a really exciting time, and you know, this is probably one of the areas that is really refreshing the whole talent management function. But why don't we move on and see what is actually happening out there in the real world here. You know, who's doing what? You know, who is actually using gamification? What are some of the case studies that we can tap into that give us a sense of who's getting good results from it?
Thanks, Sylvia. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting space, and led, like a lot of what we see in our corporate day-to-day now, by the consumer technology and the consumer space. And so, you know, I'm sure we all know that the unfortunate effect of the Sunday night cliff, where you have your employees merrily playing away with their technology and their high-tech gadgets and their different games through their weekend and their personal time, and then Monday morning hits and they fall into the corporate space, where a lot of our technology and processes, look, you've got to do it. Could it be more engaging? Yeah, it probably could be. And so bringing some games into these processes and into your day-to-day, as opposed to it being something you do on the side, and that guilty pleasure, is definitely a space that we're seeing organisations develop in, and a lot of organisations.
And some big names by the looks of it.
Yeah, big names. So yeah, these organisations are really at that forefront of testing these gamified products, but we're in only early days in terms of really testing what the ROI is there. And so we can see that there's a massive ROI from an engagement perspective, but we still don't have full product suites and full experiences that have been designed to tap into all of those gamification elements and make the most of them and really optimize them.
Let's have a look at some examples then. Hey?
Yeah, great. We love the L'Oreal tool that they're using in recruitment. What it does is really give you an introduction to L'Oreal.
I actually played this one myself, I have to admit, Aaron, so I'm kind of close to this one. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about L'Oreal and you know, what it takes to work in that organisation. I even got to launch a product.
Oh, wow. And so what it does is it takes job candidates through and tests their knowledge and skills, and then it allows them to navigate through the L'Oreal business, and along the way they're assessed and receive feedback and rewards. And so it's a novel little game. It's available online. It's something that you can go and check out yourself. And where L'Oreal gets their return on investment out of this product is that they're then able to tap into the skilled players via talent scouts. And those talent scouts then get enough information to be able to direct these people to apply for available roles or add them into their relationship management processes, keep in touch with them so that they're available when those roles come up.
So you're saying that the recruiters are actually watching these people play the games and then hunting down the great ones.
Yeah, and there's a few of these examples. I know BNP Paribas also do this in the banking space, and I think we've also got another example of Domino's, where it requires candidates to design pizzas. It's called Pizza Hero, and it actually forms part of the selection process. So a novel way of engaging people and working out where they best fit in the organisation, and really tapping into the core of what the organisation does. And it's a really interesting aspect to consider for large corporates that you bring people into white-collar positions, but they may never get that experience of the product down at that grassroots level. So connecting them into what it is that an organisation really does through some of these gamified applications.
And if all else failed, you probably learned how to make a pizza.
Now we're seeing quite a few vendors that are providing out-of-the-box gamification solutions. One of those is Badgefield. They're quite highly respected in this space. And this is an example of, it's actually a product that we use ourselves, Marketo. And through the learning process for the new users that they bring on board, they have elements like rewards that you've earned this month. You can see how you're competing against other users within the platform, so bringing in that collaboration to be able to keep people engaged. And then as you learn and increase your ability within the product, you start to become a much more experienced user and be able to display that to other people. And we're seeing, even from a badge perspective, open badges, a Mozilla initiative, that this is now starting to factor into adult learning, and you can add badges into your backpack that you can then take with you. And so we're seeing that that's a way that the initiatives that might not be tertiary or might not be specific diplomas, but you've learned something, you're able to then display that, and that's your the way that you show that you're increasing your competency over time.
And you mentioned earlier that games are being used in call center environments to improve performance and also make the workplace a little bit more fun. And I think Akaris are an example of using the technology in that way.
Yeah, so they've actually embedded even into the their system that allows them to answer and decline calls, to be able to have people following them, to be able to see what position they are in terms of the overall call center, and their customer satisfaction coming through, so they can track to a minute level how they are performing over the course of not just a week, but individual days and hours where they're on the job and really making a difference to the customers that they're supporting.
And then you've got companies like Salesforce using it to track sales performance and be able to compare the effectiveness of their sales teams.
Yeah, Sylvia, I think sales is probably one of the key areas that leaderboards are appropriate, and sales organisations have been doing this for years. But just that little layer over the top of gamifying and giving some of those dopamine rushes for people, it can give that extra level of productivity and engagement and keep people on board to be really hitting them, their milestones.
One of the areas that I sort of really like that's evolving is organisations thinking about their employees in a more holistic well-being sense, and in that whole sort of, addressing that work-life balance aspect. And I see that some companies are actually building in wellness programs into their employee mix.
And some of the early research for even just wearing a device that can track your fitness. So an initiative that might be run for those top talent within your organisation is showing that you can get percentage point increases for engagement and productivity, around the 10 or 11 percentage point mark, just by giving them the ability to see how they're tracking.
Yeah.
And then what you do with that, the health and wellbeing programs that can be initiated, there's all sorts of things that can be done as you're tracking the information that comes through.
And of course, Nike are quite famous for some of the great apps that they've got that do exactly this as well.
Yeah, healthy bodies and taking that whole of person approach and adding that little layer of gamification in there. It's getting people much more engaged and excited about the benefits and how the organisation perceives and looks after them.
So there's an enormous amount of companies, and we've just scraped the tip of the iceberg here. There are literally dozens and dozens of them cited in the white paper that people are going to have access to. So just a snippet here. But I wonder, Penny, perhaps we could run another poll just to sort of see how people are thinking about the implementation of some gamified processes in their sort of time scale of activity in their talent management programs.
Great time to put that in there, Sylvia, so thank you. So yes, I've actually opened that poll up for everybody. Now this one is a select one only, so you have to make a decision. Sorry about that, everybody. So we're trying a bit of that gamification stuff here in our polls as well. But while we do that, we have had another few questions come through, actually quite a few, so apologies, we are not going to probably get through every single question today, everybody, but I'll do my best to cover as many of them off as possible with Sylvia and Aaron. So one, just while everyone's doing the poll there, is have we seen in any of the organisations that you've been doing the research in examples of how gamification could be used for a top talent program or succession planning?
Yeah, and this is another area that is obviously a very keen focus, and it's often built off the back of development initiatives as well. So organisations that are using learning and development platforms and gamifying those are then saying, what does it next look like at the point of managing top talent and building succession pipelines? So yes, definitely. We actually see gamification used in all aspects of talent management. There just is more developed areas in the region of recruitment, learning and development at the moment. But there is not a point in the talent arena that won't be touched by gamification.
And I know there was some quite interesting things around war games that a lot of organisations are doing with their top talent. Anything you want to add to there, Sylvia?
Yeah, so war games, I mean, sound a little bit extreme, but certainly are the types of things that create both challenges and scenarios for organisational players to be involved in. That you can take say a top talent pool, put them in a particular scenario, and have them work through over a period of time a game that allows them to challenge each other, win and lose, and deal with the consequences of those wins and losses. So yes, some interesting and fun stuff being done there. And the American Army, for example, is famous for the war game that it's created, and that's one of the most played games, corporate games in the world.
Fantastic. Well, look, I'm going to close that off, so thank you very much for that, and share those results again. So it looks like a lot of people are a little unsure, or that definitely don't have it on their current agenda at the moment. And then, you know, we've got a few that already are, so maybe there's some of the examples that we've just shown or that are covered off in our white paper. So any other comments you'd like to make before I close it off? Just in the interest of time, we're getting very close to end of our allocated time today.
Yeah, I would just say, if you're not sure, you're not alone. You know, that is one of the aspects of gamification at the moment, is that people are exploring it, people are trying to understand it, and it's an evolving science and technology. And so you keep your ear to the ground and just check out some of what other organisations are doing with it, and you know, formulate a strategy about how to build it into your programs. But don't close your mind to it. It's a really exciting area of growth.
Leader, it's an opportune time to do that. Okay, so I'm going to hand back to you there, Sylvia, so that we can keep.
Okay, so let's have a look at then what the verdict is on the performance and potential assessment that we ran. Aaron, perhaps we need a drum roll for this. How do we rate the performance and potential of gamification? Okay, so our research basically gives a 2.5 rating to the performance of gamification at the moment. And that's a function of the fact that it is still very early days, that companies that are introducing it are often putting a bit of a toe in the water and looking at light applications, and there's a lot of room for growth for it. But in terms of its potential, we really do rate it. So we give it a 5 for its potential because of its transformative ability to really make an impact in the talent management arena, and fundamentally to address this issue of engagement and make the workforce and the workplace a more interesting, fun, and great place to be. So that's where we land, Penny.
Magnificent. Well, look, we've got time for one more question. So, and I apologise for those of you that have been sending through questions that we're not going to get to today. We do promise that no one will be left with a question unanswered. So, post today's webinar, one of our team will contact you directly to make sure that you've got an answer. And if they need to, they've got direct access to both Sylvia and Aaron, and of course our research to be able to help in getting the right answer to you. But just the last one here for you for today, Sylvia. Is there any examples, because it's along the same trend as the last question, but of organisations using gamification in delivering compliance training? I think that's an interesting question.
You know, we've actually just done that ourselves, Penny. In our OH&S, we had a little piece that helped you pick out all of the hazards within a particular picture, and that's a form of gamification, and it might be a really simple form, but it still made that particular learning module more memorable and more engaging than what it might have been.
And I think
thank you, Aaron, because
if you've got an open mind to thinking about making any type of task or activity more engaging in the workplace, then put a gamification lens on it and see what you can introduce to make it do that. I think there's a lot of scope.
Yeah. And not every area of talent management is going to be appropriate for every organisation. We can definitely see through the work that we're doing at the moment that gamification works perfectly for onboarding. But we know it works perfectly for onboarding because it's the defined period of time. We don't have to make sure that it's engaging people over multiple years. And we've got fresh people coming through all the time. So if we're experimenting in that area and we're introducing new pieces of gamification, it's not as much of a concern if it doesn't stick, because the next new starter, we can give a new experience and make sure that we're tweaking and fine-tuning as much as we can for these processes. And it's exactly the same for the graduate space. So there are definitely some areas where you can tip your toe in the water if you're not already, and we're very open to having conversations about how you might be able to do that in conjunction with the page-up technology.
Yeah. And thank you, Aaron. When you answered my question previously, you actually answered one of our other questions that had come through, which is about how is PageUp actually using gamification themselves. So thank you for answering two questions in one. I was hoping that might be the case. Well, look, we are right on time now, so I did want to, again, reiterate to everybody, if we haven't been able to get to your question today, it's just due to time, so we apologise for that, but we will get back to you with an answer, so we won't leave you hanging. We also have, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's webinar, recorded today's session for you. So what will happen is within the next 1 to 2 days, working days those being, you will receive an email from us with a direction on how to access the actual recording and that special gift, which is a copy of the actual gamification white paper. So just reiterating all of that for everybody. So a big thank you, Sylvia and Aaron, for your time today and for joining us from Singapore. And sharing with you some of the great insights from the research and your own experience as you've been out there working with some of the PageUp clients as well as some of the potential PageUp clients. So thank you again. Get you to say goodbye to everybody.
Thanks so much, Penny, and to all of our attendees. You have a wonderful day and play a game.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. So bye all.